welcome back to Straight Talk Commerce, everybody. Today, I'm going to dive deep into a topic that impacts every single e-commerce entrepreneur. Tariffs. Why do governments impose them? More importantly, how can you overcome them and keep your business thriving? Stick around. I'm going to break down the strategies, I'm going to share some real-world case studies, and help you navigate the very complex world of international trade. I'm Wayne Altman. This is Straight Talk Commerce. It begins in 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
No fluff, no hype, just the real deal. Wayne Altman's here, yeah, you know the drill. Talking business, talking shop, making moves non-stop. From e-com to hustle, straight talk, no props. Straight talk, no gimmicks, no lies. Hey, I break it down with the sharpest minds. Money moves, mindset, grind. If you're ready to win, then tune in live. Big names, big games, all the lessons they bring. From Jelly Belly to AA Kings. From the startup grind to the top tier pros. We crack the code, now here we go. Straight talk, commerce, getting to know with Wayne Altman. Let's start the show.
All right. Tariffs have been in the news a lot lately. They're a common tool in international trade. They are employed by virtually all countries to various degrees. And according to the World Trade Organization, the WTO, over 170 countries and territories will impose tariffs on imported goods. The application and rates of those tariffs differ slightly across all nations. For example, Bermuda has one of the highest weighted mean tariff applied tariffs, 24% across the board. While countries like Hong Kong and Macau have zero tariffs imported goods. In summary, nearly every country utilizes tariffs, but the specific rates and policies are influenced, not just influenced, they are definitely ingrained by each nation's economic strategies, what the trade agreements are, who their friends are, and what that country's developmental objectives are. And some of the reasons, top 4 reasons that countries will apply tariffs are to protect their domestic industry. That's really, if you look at it, overall, the main reason that people impose tariffs, why tariffs are imposed, is to protect the domestic industries and companies within that country. Now, they also generate governmental revenue, and they also counteract unfair trade practices. And finally, they're used in a pretty broad way to respond to geopolitical disputes. For example, the United States and China are in what some people are thinking is a trade war, trying to get them to one country trying to get the other country to play nicer with the rest of the world. You can look at that however you want, whichever side of that you're on. Now, tariffs impact e-commerce specifically, which is why we're talking about it. It will impact commerce and e-commerce in specific with increased product costs. Because if you're importing your products through your e-commerce business, well, you're going to have to be dealing with tariffs, which is why we're talking about that today. We're going to mitigate some of that here in a few minutes, but definitely it applies to us. It shrinks your profit margins because you are having to either charge your customers more and get less customers, or you're having to eat some of that tariff costs. It will also determine what your supply chain is doing, where you are getting your products, right? Because you're going to have to make adjustments if the country you're receiving your product from is involved in a trade war with the people that you're selling to. And it also is for slower global expansion. So you're not going to be expanding your business outside your own territory, outside your own country, with a bunch of tariffs that are weighing you down. Which is why we want to talk about this for a few minutes. Ways to overcome tariffs. United States post tariffs. you're going to want to look to mitigate that damage, because it could actually hurt you. And the first way that you want to do that is by sourcing alternatives to the products that you are currently carrying. The survival store that I own, we went from virtually all of the products that I carried being sourced in China to sourcing those products within the United States, continental United States. Guess what? Zero tariffs. Very quick, very easy way of defeating that tariff policy. So try to move your suppliers to a more tariff-friendly country and circumstance for yourself, if that is something that is, hampering your business. If that's something that is of concern to you, first thing that you're going to want to do, shift those logistics to a country that won't be affected by those tariffs. Take advantage of treaties like the USMCA, the EU-Japan Free Trade Agreement. Depending on where your business is selling, you look up where those tariffs are applicable and then navigate around the tariff. You don't have to, so you don't have that to worry about as much anymore. You'll also want to do some customs optimization. Use bonded warehousing or use free trade zones to get your customers those products and we're now avoiding where those tariffs are and how they're affecting our customers. Maybe use a reclassification strategy. Adjust your product material or descriptions to lower duty rates, and also adjust the size of what you're selling. And by that I mean the quantity. Adjust the quantity available, and that may help you to reduce the impact of any tariffs on you. Again, try to localize production. Find someone local to you that will manufacture these to your key markets and bypass import duties altogether. One of the main reasons that President Trump is increasing tariffs is to bring back production to the United States. So, by doing that increases the amount of work, the amount of jobs for people here, and it's in the long term a very good strategy. Has been used 230 some years of American history. It's been used several times. We're going to get into that, by the way. We're going to put all of the presidents in how they use tariffs. Because I assure you, Donald Trump is not the first president to use tariffs, some more effectively than others, but he is definitely not the first president to ever use tariffs in American history, despite what you're hearing. Everybody's blathering. And then look for tariff drawbacks. Apply for refunds on imported goods that are later re-exported. So if you are importing something into this country for export to another country, you can do what is called a tariff drawback. Apply for refunds on the imported goods that are later re-exported. So those are really good ways of avoiding the tariffs that we are talking about. And I'm going to give you now 10 case studies on e-commerce business and how they handle tariffs. Amazon as a seller struggled with U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports. A U.S. Amazon reseller faced a 25% tariff on Chinese manufactured goods, but they quickly pivoted by sourcing to Vietnam, who had no tariff. And it reduced their costs so significantly that they increased the amount of sales that they had, and their customers paid a lower price. So everyone talking about prices going up, that's not necessarily the case. Prices may go up on some things, perhaps, but it doesn't mean because the tariff got increased. If you shift where that is produced, where that is made, guess what? Prices, because of the tariffs, prices could actually go down for your customer.
ToolEssential.ai is an innovative platform designed to streamline and optimize workflow automation for businesses of all sizes. integrating seamlessly with your existing tools and systems. ToolEssential.ai leverages advanced AI to automate repetitive tasks, enhance productivity, and reduce human error. Our platform offers customized solutions tailored to your industry needs, empowering your team to focus on strategic, high-value activities. With ToolEssential.ai, you gain real-time insights, improve operational efficiency, and achieve faster, more impactful results, ultimately driving your business growth and success. Experience the future of work with ToolEssential.ai.
Which brings me to another case study of a European fashion brand navigated all of the Brexit tariffs. See, the United States isn't the only country in the world that impose and have tariffs imposed on them. A UK-based clothing brand suffered massive EU tariffs after Brexit. But they mitigated their costs by setting up a fulfillment center in the EU, and it totally negated any of those tariffs. An electronics company using a free trade zone. Canada, we've heard a lot about Canada. One of the things Canada did, a Canadian electronics seller used a duty-free warehouse in Mexico. It lowered the tariff expenses when it exported to the United States. One of the things that President Trump is so upset about is a part of this. Canada being able to manipulate and use tariff-free zones to avoid U.S. tariffs and impose tariffs on the U.S., he believes unfairly. I'm not trying to carry water for President Trump, but trying to explain to my audience exactly what all of this is going on. Scratch a little bit deeper than what the press is going to tell you. A U.S. e-commerce entrepreneur in Texas utilized the USMCA, we called that NAFTA before, to completely avoid duties when selling to Canada and Mexico. And he did that because of quantities, sales of quantity, adjusted the quantity of what he was selling, lowered the individual quantities, and they were able to go into Canada and Mexico without tariff. And a luxury brand that adapted to India's very high import duties. It was a high-end watch brand. I won't go into who that was, but they restructured their entire pricing strategy, and they localized production in India to bypass any high tariffs and defeated the the tariffs that India was putting on their brand. So there are mitigating things that you can do. I've got four more case studies. There are definitely things that you can do to avoid, personally avoid, or mitigate, at the very least, mitigate the amount of tariffs your customers are going to have to pay. And really what I'm trying to say is, if your customers are actually having to pay higher prices on the products that you're selling to them, it's probably because of you. It is more to do with the company than it is with what any government did. If you're not looking for ways to be more competitive and using these tariffs that we're placing on other countries to be more competitive, shame on you. Shame on you. Because this tariff thing actually, when you think about it, gives you cracks, gives you openings into being more competitive, and if you are paying attention. A Shopify dropshipper transitioned from Chinese suppliers to ones in Thailand and totally avoided any Trump-era first-term U.S.-China tariffs. And it blew that company up. Blew them up. So you can definitely use what your government is doing to your advantage. Again, one of the reasons that we're increasing tariffs some places are actually just for that. And an Australian e-commerce brand expanded into Southeast Asia, where they were not before, by the way, because they were facing high tariffs in their exports to Europe. It was an Australian beauty brand, and they pivoted to selling tariff-friendly Asian markets. So it may mean, hey, we're going to shift our focus, sell into areas that are not tariffing us, are not taxing us this way, and growing our business that way. Again, if you are facing higher prices as a consumer, you may want to adjust the countries or the companies that you are purchasing from, because they are not paying attention to keeping their costs as low as they can for you. An American auto parts seller recovered thousands through a tariff refund program for re-exported goods. They were importing into the United States and realized, wait a minute, we paid tariffs on these products set to be exported to another country. And they were able to ask the government and get a drawback on those tariffs. So, all is not lost. If you get charged a tariff, well, guess what? You need to be very well aware of how all of this works, or it's just going to eat, just like anything else, it's just going to eat you alive. And then finally, a Brazilian e-commerce startup tackled their very high import taxes by forming partnerships with local distributors. A Brazilian startup bypassed sky-high import duties. I mean, we're talking in the neighborhood of between 25 and 75% import tariffs, but they formed partnerships with local distributors. It gave people locally a job, and guess what? Avoided the tariffs that were being placed on them. I'm sorry, there is one more. And then a global smartwatch brand redesigned its product to be classified under a lower tariff category, and not only save them millions in production cost, but also save themselves several more million in the tariffs for export. So you see, if a company is smart, you can use these tariffs to better your business and actually lower your cost for the product while increasing your profit margin, and that sounds like a really good thing. The United States has used tariffs ever since the first day of its founding as a key economic policy tool. Tariffs have been employed for various reasons, to include raising government income and revenue, protecting their domestic industries, responding to tariffs from other countries, trade disputes, and leveraging international negotiations when it befit our country. So from the first day this country was founded, we have been using tariffs this way, and let's talk about that. In 1789, the early revenue tariffs, the Tariff Act of 1789, was one of the very first laws signed by Congress. It imposed tariffs to fund the federal government, as income taxes. We went for a very long time in this country with no income tax. And the government made its money by imposing tariffs on goods that were imported into this country. Now, in the 19th century, protectionist tariffs were a primary source of government revenue until the very early 1900s. The Tariff Act of 1828 was called the Tariff of Abominations. It led to significant political tensions, especially in the South. One of the things that we don't talk about in this country is tariffs actually helped to cause and fund the Civil War. And after the Civil War, tariffs were used to protect American manufacturing that was rebuilding in the South and in the North from foreign competition. So tariffs can actually have a positive benefit on the country as well, if you have a president that knows how they're used. In the 20th century, trade liberalization was in the 20th century with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. It raised tariffs significantly, and it worsened the Great Depression by reducing global trade. We could have pulled out of the Great Depression so much earlier, but most experts agree, if we had not in 1930 put together the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. In the 40s to the 90s, the United States generally lowered tariffs through international agreements like GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and then later on the WTO. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, eliminated most tariffs between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. which kind of leads you to wonder, what was Canada and Mexico doing to make that go away? And the answer to that is they were cheating on those treaties. They were cheating. And so it became incumbent upon the current president and his first term to remedy that.
If your business operations feel like a grind, you're missing out on the magic of artificial intelligence. Whether you're in retail, manufacturing, finance, or any other industry, AI is a game changer. From automating mundane tasks to optimizing your supply chain, AI can transform how you operate. We specialize in creating tailored AI solutions that meet your unique challenges and goals. With our expertise, you can improve efficiency, reduce errors, and make better decisions. Discover how AI can revolutionize your business. Contact us today at www.toolessentials.ai/consultation.
The 21st century saw strategic and political use of tariffs, and we're going to talk about that right now. Because the Trump administration from 2018 to 2020 reintroduced protectionist tariffs, especially targeting China, on steel and aluminum imports. President Trump feels that we need domestic production of steel and aluminum, and depending on your opinion of that, he imposed tariffs to bring back some of those industries, and the production of aluminum and steel in the United States would constitute no tariff, and we would then have domestic production back. The United States and China trade war led to hundreds of billions of dollars in new tariffs, and it affected consumer goods and raw materials. Later, the Biden administration maintained most of those tariffs and selectively adjusted policies, particularly the policies regarding China and some of our allies. They make adjustments on these tariffs. Not all tariffs are completely bad, and minor adjustments sometimes can mean the world of difference. And today, the United States is using tariffs to protect domestic industries like, again, steel and aluminum, protecting and drawing more manufacturing into this country. We also have agricultural tariffs that shield American farmers from cheap food products flooding the United States, really the consumer nation of the world. And trade war and economic leverage. The Chinese tariffs were imposed to counteract unfair trade practices and reduce our trade deficit with China. Tariffs are always used in geopolitical strategies. Anytime that we sanction Russia, we apply new tariffs to Russia, trying to get that country to behave and more commensurate with the United States and how we feel countries should behave. It always encourages domestic production. Higher tariffs on solar panels, semiconductors, and batteries are out to try to boost U.S. manufacturing, provide jobs for Americans. And by doing that, you eliminate any tariff that you may run into. And then for revenue generation, we have a $37 trillion debt. Our debt is around $37 trillion. We need to increase revenue generation, and you cannot always do that through means of production. Even though it's not a primary source of income anymore, it's about to be. But tariffs still generate billions and billions of dollars for the U.S. government annually. Look, to conclude this section, the United States has used tariffs for over 230 years. And it shifts from revenue generation to protectionism to trade negotiation tools all the time. With each administration, and we're going to get into that in just a second, with each administration, each president that has come in has had a different view of how tariffs should be used. Some of them to great effect, some of them not so much. While free trade agreements reduced tariffs in the late 20th century, recent years have seen a complete resurgence of tariffs as a strategic economic weapon. Times change. situations change. And so you've got to have leadership that responds to those changes. And just because we haven't done something for the last 30, 40, 50 years doesn't mean it isn't time for us to do that now. Speaking of which, let's compare U.S. presidents on their use of tariffs. And I've dug out some information of some of the presidents in our history and how they've used tariffs. U.S. presidents have used tariffs in many different ways to achieve our economic, political, and strategic goals. Some of our presidents leveraged tariffs to protect domestic industries. Others pursued free trade and willy-nilly importing all kinds of products into the country. They wanted to promote economic growth and global partnerships, and to great effect, by the way. So here's how some key presidents used tariffs and whether they helped or whether they hurt the United States in retrospect in the global economy. First one I want to talk about is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln from 1861 to 1865 used tariffs to build U.S. industry. His strategy was high tariffs to protect American manufacturing and fund the Civil War. The outcome of that helped establish the United States as an industrial powerhouse, but it raised prices for consumers and created a situation where it made exasperated the problems in the country to a degree. William McKinley, 1897 to 1901, was widely considered to be the tariff president. His strategy in the Dingley Tariff Act of 1897 raised import duties to protect U.S. jobs and businesses. The outcome of that was he boosted the U.S. industrial growth really very well. But he discouraged international trade to the point where we were losing our allies globally. And it didn't matter as much then as it does now. We've got to really walk a fine line now because it's easier to interact with our global partners and run into problems. Let's move into the 20th century. There was a shift toward trade liberalization in the 20th century with Herbert Hoover, 1929 to 1933. We talked about the Smoot-Hawley disaster. The strategy in the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930 was to raise tariff on over 20,000 imported goods. It protected U.S. businesses during the Great Depression. Problem is, it actually made the Great Depression last longer. It would have been a depression, not the Great Depression, had we not collapsed global trade. As other countries retaliated against us, it worsened our own depression. And presidents would be very wise to heed that and to watch that strategy, including the current president. FDR in 1933 through 1945, he reversed Smoot-Hawley, and the strategy introduced the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act that President Trump talks about all the time. He reduced tariffs through trade deals. In other words, you don't charge me a tariff, I won't charge you a tariff. If you charge me 10%, I'm going to charge you 10%. The outcome of that stimulated trade and helped the United States emerge as by far the #1 global economic leader, even to this day. John F. Kennedy, 1961 to 1963, issued in the Trade Expansion Act. His strategy was to lower tariffs and to strengthen alliances and promote exports. Now, he was criticized very heavily for that, but it actually shortened the Cold War, if you want to look at it. It boosted World War II economic growth post World War II. but it faced criticism from domestic industries. The industries in this country hated Kennedy for doing that because they were no longer being protected by their own country. Ronald Reagan in 81 through 89 imposed strategic tariffs. His strategy supported free trade, but it imposed tariffs on Japanese electronics and steel to protect American steel and electronics companies. The outcome of that strengthened American tech and auto industries, but it led to some severe tensions with Japan. Getting into the 21st century, George W. Bush, 2001 to 2009, very short-lived tariffs. His strategy was to impose steel tariffs to protect U.S. manufacturers. The outcome backfired tremendously. He paid no attention. Europe wasn't the EU, but Europe retaliated. The World Trade Organization ruled against his tariffs, and they were repealed in 2003. And man, it caused a lot of issues. And then coming up, even worse after that, Barack Obama from 2009 to 2017, he promoted free trade agreements like the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but he kept key tariffs on Chinese tires. The outcome of that strengthened global trade partnerships in some areas, but at the expense of domestic manufacturing sectors. And you saw a good portion of our middle class went hasta la bye-bye during that administration. And that brings us to Donald Trump from 2017 to 2021. His strategy imposed massive tariffs on China from 2018 to 2020 on steel, aluminum, and also on European goods. The outcome of that was it boosted U.S. industries. It gained the United States gobs of money and raised our GDP. But the increased consumer costs hurt farmers because China then retaliated. And so, there you have it. Joe Biden, 2021 to just last year, made some tariff adjustments. His strategy maintained almost all of Trump-era Chinese tariffs, but reduced some duties and promoted trade deals with allies. The outcome, it protected some industries in the United States, semiconductors and EVs, but some businesses faced super high costs on importation of goods. So there you have it. I mean, listen, you could say that Trump, Lincoln, McKinley, Roosevelt, and Reagan used tariffs effectively to build U.S. industry strategically, that President Trump short-term boost for U.S. manufacturing and had some mixed results long-term. And you can also look at this and say that Hoover, with the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, made the Great Depression worse, and Bush and Obama, their steel tariffs failed and were very quickly repealed, and it was, they created problems for the United States economy. Early tariffs built the U.S. economy. Modern presidents are forced to mix free trade with selective tariffs. Poorly designed tariffs with Hoover and Bush can harm global trade, and strategic tariffs like Reagan and Trump can protect industries, but it carries high risks, and it can also make a great deal of money for the country when you're talking about how those tariffs are used. Now, let's talk for a minute about how to overcome tariffs no matter who's in charge, how to overcome tariffs in your own e-commerce business, because you are going to want to know this information. Tariffs can increase costs, shrink your profit margins, and disrupt your supply chains. Smart strategies can help you mitigate the impact. So here are some ways to overcome tariffs and keep your e-commerce businesses profitable. Number one, diversify your suppliers. Do not, the old days of drop shipping from China and China alone, those are gone. Those are done. Here's why that works. Many tariffs target specific countries like China. If you source from tariff-free or lower tariff countries, you immediately cut your costs of production and your costs of logistics, lowering your prices for your customer, and you'll be able to sell more products more easily. And here's how you do that. Identify alternative suppliers in Vietnam, India, Mexico, Eastern Europe, or right here in the United States. Use global sourcing platforms like Alibaba Global Sources and India Mart Inventory Source as well. And build relationships with multiple suppliers depending on where you're shipping to reduce your risks. Use tariff reclassification and classification. And here's why that works. This is awesome. Tariffs are based on harmonized systems. Codes, other similar products may have different tariff rates. So slight modifications to your product could qualify it for lower taxed categories. Here's how you do this. Consult with a customs broker to explore new classification options and sectors. Change the materials or assembly locations to lower your tariff rates. Research HTS, harmonized tariff schedules, and their codes to find better alternatives, cheaper alternatives, more local alternatives. You are the business owner. You're the one that has the control. Also, try to leverage free trade agreements when you can. These FTAs, many countries have tariff-free trade agreements. USMCA, the EU FTAs. And by importing from FTA countries, you can bypass tariffs. And here's how you do that. Work with suppliers. If you're selling in Canada, work with suppliers in Canada. If you're selling to Mexico, work with suppliers in Mexico or South Korea or anywhere in the United States. Or work with a supplier in South Korea if you're in the United States or Vietnam to provide tariff-free products to your customers. Check which FTAs your country has to take advantage of tariff reductions. So find out what country makes this product, who can I supply this from, where I do not pay these tariffs, and it's cheaper for me to get my product from there. You run a business. These are things you can do to help your consumer instead of just sitting there wringing your hand and allowing your prices to go through the roof. And ensure your supplier provides the right documentation for any tariff exemptions. It's very important. You can utilize the duty drawback programs that I talked about earlier. If you import raw materials and you later export the final product, you are eligible most times for a tariff refund. The United States and many other countries will refund up to 99% of any tariff, any duty paid on re-exported goods. If you are an American manufacturer and you import raw materials and you produce something here in the United States that is then going to be exported to outside of the country, you can get up to 99% of that tariff that you paid on the importation of the raw materials. You can get that back. You can get that back, and it won't have any effect on the price that you have to offer that widget, that whatever it is for. And here's how you do that. Check to see if you qualify for a duty drawback program in your country. Keep very detailed records of imports and exports, and work with a customs expert to file claim for those and file them properly. And most of these are very quick. You will get those credits back before you actually even pay the tariff on those. I see that all the time. And here's how you do that. You route your shipments through duty-free zones: Singapore, Hong Kong, Macau. Work with 3PL, third-party logistics providers, to optimize warehousing and avoid direct tariff costs. This should be someone in your business that is paying very close attention to how this works. That way your customers do not get zapped with tariffs every time they turn around and your prices go through the roof. Use a bonded warehouse to store your goods before final importation, and that will reduce a great deal of this. Something else you could do is negotiate pricing and terms with your suppliers. And here's why that works, and this is a very good idea to do regardless. You need to be keeping very close negotiations with your suppliers at all times anyways. Suppliers understand your tariffs, and they may offer lower prices or better terms in order to keep your business. So those people saying it's the consumer that pays the tariff, they don't know what they're talking about. Most of the time, it is not. That's the easy way out. And if you're dealing with that, that's wrong. But most of the time, it is the actual person producing the good that is paying these tariffs. And they pay it through reducing their production costs and being able to continue to sell their product. Some manufacturers will even share the tariff burden by offering you discounts because they don't want you to go away. They cannot take having the consumer go away and not pay for the product. And here's how you do that. Request bulk order discounts to offset any tariff costs, or reduce the amount in each order so you avoid tariffs on the larger. So you get it both ways. Some tariffs affect large orders. Some tariffs come into effect on smaller orders. Pay attention to that. You can save a ton of money on tariffs that way. Negotiate longer payment terms to put an ease to your cash flow. So if you're dealing with China right now, let them know that you need longer terms, and try to negate any devastating effects on your business that way. And then also ask your suppliers if they can manufacture or assemble products in lower tariff countries. In other words, most Chinese companies from President Trump's first terms instituted in this country, in the United States, places where their products are being manufactured, giving Americans jobs and creating an area where they are not affected by tariffs, which is how this is supposed to work. Pass the tariff costs to customers, but do it strategically. Raising your prices will hurt sales. Small increases spread across multiple products will probably go unnoticed. If it does, you weren't charging enough anyway. Use bundles or premium positioning and help justify the higher prices. So give your customers better value, and it will negate the higher price that you're forced to charge them. And here's how you do that. Bundle your products to make price increases less obvious and less painful. Use psychological pricing. For example, increase your product $4.99 instead of by $5. Offer loyalty discounts to offset any increase for repeat customers. Do you see what I just did there? Increased tariff on you. You know they're going to have to pay higher prices. You tried your best, but you couldn't find a way that you couldn't raise the prices. But you use it as a benefit to yourself. My loyal customers, I'm going to eat the tariff. My first-time customers, they're going to have to bear the cost. It will behoove your customers to buy from you more often and more because they want to avoid and get better pricing. Reshore or nearshore your production. And you should be doing this anyway. And here's why this works. Manufacturing domestically, or if you can't, closer to home, reduces your reliance on tariffs and import delays. number one. Number two, it will reduce your logistics because those products have to be driven or flown or transported for shorter distances. So you may make up on the transportation costs what you spent tariff-wise. And although upfront costs may be higher, savings on tariffs and shipping can actually balance it out, which is what I just said. You balance out your tariff increase by your logistics decrease. Here's how to do that. Look for domestic manufacturers offering competitive pricing. Consider partial production shifts, meaning assemble the product parts locally. Take the parts from other areas, assemble them locally. You've just negated most of the tariffs. Research any tax incentives for reshoring into your country. You should be doing that anyway if you're a patriotic American citizen. You should be doing everything you can to bring production right back to the US of A and giving your fellow countrymen jobs. That's, my 2 cents on that. Stay updated on any change in trade policy or tariff exemptions. If you find that tariffs are just eating up your business and you haven't been able to, I've given you 8 ways to avoid them now. If none of those apply to you, you need to stay updated on trade policies and tariff exemptions. And why that works is governments will frequently adjust tariffs due to political and economic changes. So that means if President Trump gets the reaction that he's looking for from Canada and from Mexico and from China, these tariff policies are liable to change again. And you want to stay up on that. Some businesses in the U.S. are going to qualify for tariff exemptions or waivers. We saw that. They blamed the president for changing his mind when in reality, that's not what he did at all. He just extended the time period out to help domestic companies. Here's how you do that. You follow the World Trade Organization, any U.S. trade representative, and any EU trade updates. You want to consult with customs brokers or trade attorneys and explore any exemptions. And there's government offices still that will help you do that. And then join trade organizations and associations that will lobby against harmful tariffs. So if you are being tariffed and it is harming your business, make your voice known. One other way of doing this that I haven't heard anybody talking about is the shift to digital and service-based revenue streams. So if your importing and exporting is suffering, shift to a digital and a service-based revenue stream because tariffs only apply to physical goods. Shifting to a digital product avoids tariffs entirely, and high-margin digital offerings can offset any rising costs in physical goods. And here's how you do that. Look for courses to sell, memberships to sell, subscriptions to sell, any digital downloads that you can sell alongside of the current products you're selling. Offer a consulting or a training service that is related to your niche. Create a subscription-based model to increase your current revenue and avoid tariffs. Here's some final thoughts for you. You can whine and cry and wring your hands and chew your lips over the United States policy on tariffs, or you can turn that into a competitive advantage. While tariffs increase costs, the best businesses will adapt and they will find new ways to stay profitable and probably even gain profit in the meantime. If you will diversify your suppliers, if you will use tariff exemptions, if you will optimize your shipping and your logistics while adjusting your pricing strategies, not only will you stay competitive, you will dominate your competition and you will grow despite any trade, quote unquote, barriers. And if you would like help in applying these strategies to a specific product or business model, drop a comment or contact me, and I am sure that I can help you with that. Listen, that's really what I've got for you. I know that this is a little bit longer episode. But I felt like it was definitely something that we needed to talk about, especially since it's dominated the news and so many people got so up in arms over what it is the president was trying to do. All right, that is a wrap on tariffs and e-commerce. Now you know why they exist. You know why they impact your business, and more importantly, you should know by now how to overcome them or have a very good idea. If you found this episode helpful, which I'm sure you did, do not forget to subscribe and leave me your comments down below. If you have any tariff horror stories or strategic success and suggestions, I need to know about them. Share them with me in the comments or on social media. We can be found anywhere. And I will see you next time. Peace.
No fluff, no hype, just the real deal. Wayne Altman's here, yeah, you know the drill. Talking business, talking shop, making moves non-stop. From e-com to hustle, straight talk, no props. Straight talk, no gimmicks, no lies. Hey, I break it down with the sharpest minds. Money moves, mindset, grind. If you're ready to win, big names, big games, all the lessons they bring from Jelly Belly to AA Kings, from the startup grind to the top tier pros, we crack the code, now here we go.